Hello, good afternoon. Good afternoon, all y'all. Welcome to the NC ECHO program for December, complement of the season as we wind down for the year. I want to apologize that we missed out on the November session. We were meant to have had antimicrobial stewardship because of the awareness week. Unfortunately, there were so many competing conferences, and so we couldn't really have the plan. We wanted to shift it to this month, but I think we will have it in January by His grace. So we are taking on our normal schedule for December. So you're all welcome. We hope other people will join us soon. My name is Dr. Ali Shuwande, and with me is the ICANN admin manager, Mr. Lee Konfolari. We are still expecting Mrs. Obishuri, but she went to Central Lagos for an emergency. But if she doesn't make it, outstanding for her, but she can come in anytime from now. Now, today we are planning to, the big umbrella is injection safety. And the agenda that will be shared very soon is that we have the free introduction. We have ECHO India with us, and NSIC Nigeria is right here in this hall. We hope to have the safe injection practices that overview by Mrs. Olufumi initially. We're expecting her. And then to be followed by state injection safety, progress and pitfall, a literature review by Dr. Jim Onka. Then after that, from about 3 o'clock, we have discussions, reactions, comments, where are we, where do we want to be? And then of course we have feedback and announcements. But as part of this welcome and introduction, we are going to have a brief slide from ECHO India introducing us to Zoom. I know most of us are senior people, but we realize that we have some lower cadre healthcare worker from the PAC that are with us. We need to just remind ourselves, just see it as a reminder. I know for the senior people, we don't want to call you, but we just want to ask Simran, and I don't know if Lydia is there, to introduce themselves, and then we'll have the introduction to Zoom conferencing.
Great.
So thank you, Dr. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Swande. So hi, everyone. My name is Simran Agarwal, and I work at ECHO India as a project executive. And I'm really happy to see you all. So right now, I'll share my slides and will let you know the basic introduction of the Zoom for your reference. I hope my screen is visible. So let's get started with the basic features of Zoom. So first of all, we would really request you to kindly rename yourself, and you can follow the naming convention by writing your name. And in the bracket, you can mention the name of the facility from which you are joining in. And if you have more than one person joining in from the same device, then please write the number of the extra participants so that we can track the number of the exact participant count. We would really appreciate if you can do so. Second, you can see the mute and mute button on your screen, and you can also see the chat box option down in your screen. So if you have any question, then please write it down in the chat box and the hub team will definitely address it. Third one is that you can either introduce yourself by unmuting yourself, or you can also write it down in the chat box. And when you're not speaking, then we would really request you to kindly mute your mic so that we can run the session smoothly and there are no background noises. And if your bandwidth allows, then kindly switch on your videos and make sure that you sit in the front of the camera so that your face is properly visible. Then you can keep your phone on silent so that you can concentrate on the session. And if you have any question, then instead of directly unmuting yourself, you can first raise your hand and then we will let you know that when you can raise that question. And if you're presenting a case, then please make sure that no patient details are present on that slide. So that was it from my end. Thank you so much, everyone. Dr. Swande, over to you. Dr. Swande, you are on mute.
Pardon? Hello, sorry, thank you very much. I'm sorry, we got muted. Thank you very much for that. It's just a way of reminder, especially for people that are just joining us that are not used to Zoom. This is one thing that COVID-19 has taught us. I think on that note, Mrs. Omishore, I'm sure she's stuck in traffic, but because of time, we will not wait. I will take a presentation, but I will just do a short introduction. Mrs. Omishore is a senior pharmacist by profession, and she was director at Lagos State University Teaching Hospital in Kenya, where she retired. She's a very, very strong eye infection prevention and control enthusiast and the facilitator. We work together on the curriculum development for the IPC CDC curriculum. She's facilitated injection safety, healthcare waste management, antimicrobial stewardship. She's been on this NSIC ECHO until the first phase of the antimicrobial stewardship that we had. She's a member of NSIC, she's a board member of NSIC and a member of the pharmaceutical board. Well, we are here to discuss safe injection practices and nobody. I'm going to do it on our behalf. I'll try and do justice. We should just take notes of what we think, because we want to just bring ourselves up to speed. Now, as a way of outline, we're going to give an introduction of what it's all about, definition of a safe injection, major issues in injection safety, unsafe injection practices, and the associated risks. We talk about risk assessment, types of the injection safety devices, the best practices, and then unsafe injection disposal and the effects. So that's a then we conclude. Now, as a way of introduction, in Nigeria and in most developing countries, we've reported in the past 10 years, that unnecessary injection happens a lot, and most of it are unsafe. Injection practices in the healthcare system were not always safe. Even within the highest, not just in Nigeria, but even in America and the West, it's still not safe, so we still need to remind ourselves to improve knowledge, skills, and behavioral change of our healthcare provider in giving safe injection with relevance to infection prevention and control. Especially, we want to stop the transmission of blood-borne diseases. WHO launched a new policy in the year 2015 for safer therapeutic injections, recommending two major means to enhance injection safety. Number one, it recommended switching of syringes that have sharp injury protection, ballistic injury prevention devices, to reduce staff injuries to healthcare workers. And two, switching syringes that have reuse prevention protection features, we call it RUT, to reduce reuse for the that is harmful to the patient and the community. And of course, injection safety focuses on preventing disease transmission by giving injection. Injection is the most commonest thing in the healthcare sector. Actually, the picture of a syringe and needle shows that at hospital. Now, what is the use of injection fluid? Actually, I don't think this can be emphasized. When you go on the television, that's COVID-19, all over the world, we are advocating for COVID vaccination. But then, In the past, these are the statistics. I'm sure the statistics for immunization would have gone up. But 16.3 billion injections were given each year in the developing country where Nigeria is born. And 5 to 10% used to be, I'm sure it will be slightly more than 10% now. Most vaccines are administered by injections, except for oral, like oral polio, but most of it is right. And that is why injection safety actually came up from. I started with immunization, from immunization, injection safety. And then therapeutic injection, we mentioned 2015, where most of the injections are being given. 90 to 95 is where the injections are being given, was just recognized less than 10 years ago, 2015 by WHO. And I think that is, the intervention is ongoing. So what then do we say safe injection is? Well, when we say needle and syringe, we draw from the ampoules. A safe injections protect the patient, the healthcare worker, and the community from avoidable infections. Now it is beyond just intramuscular injections, lancet procedures, any sharp entering the body, aspiration of ascites, phlebotomy, blood taking, IV line. It is a set of measures that perform injections in an optimally safe manner to the patient, healthcare personnel, and others. And when we say others, that is the community, our auxiliary staff, and the community at large. So now, what are the 4 major issues that we want to talk about in injection safety? We want to talk about risk to the patient. Our patient said do no harm. We want to make sure we don't expose them to unnecessary harm. Now, in those days, they used to revoice syringes. I hope that doesn't happen again. The National Injection Safety Assessment will assess to make sure that nobody picks syringes and then boil and use. That is why we had that policy of 2015. We have spoken about overuse of injection, either in the formal sector or in the informal sector. Because some people feel it's only when you have an injection that you get treated. So injections are being overused. But luckily for us in Africa, it's not a big issue. The worst culprit now is Asia, especially Pakistan. Unsafe collection. Do we still have risk to the healthcare workers? Do we still have people collecting needles and syringes and the plastic like this? And then when we move from the hospital, do we move it to the community behind the hospital and just commingle it and expose the community at large to the risk of needles injury? So then that takes us to unsafe injection practices. Is what I've just shown you. Remember that picture at the back of your mind? Using the same needle and syringe to administer medication to more than one patient. If you use one syringe and needle for more than one patient, whether they are the same mother or father, it is not safe. Using medication package as single dose for more than one patient. When it says single dose, it is single dose. Assessing a medication vial or bag with a syringe that has already been used to administer medication to one patient previously. So no sharing, no love shared, not ensuring a septic technique when preparing and administering injection. But these are some of the few things that, well, from the picture to this, so that these are common practices that we may not really think is unsafe. If the procedure is not septic technique, then we have broken it. Unsafe injection practices, which includes reusing injection equipment, increase the risk of transmission of infection diseases, such as hemorrhagic fevers, malaria. Hemorrhagic fever is in the news in Nigeria that we lost two senior Obs and gynae practitioners in Nasarawa State due to Lassa fever, needle and syringe, malaria, hepatitis B and C, HIV, skin abscesses, nerve damage, and paralysis of the area around the injection sites. So what are the risks associated with unsafe injection practices? Under three main headings: blood-borne pathogen transmission, hepatitis B, C, HIV, hemorrhagic fevers. Of those, it's only hepatitis B that has a vaccination. So we advocate that healthcare workers, as much as possible, to have their hepatitis B vaccination. Abscesses can be from unsafe injection, septic or aseptic, and nerve damage with risk of paralysis. I have a neighbor that just recently, and I think we would think it's something that is remote, but it is still happening. I saw him deeply and said, what happened? It was nerve damage, sciatic nerve. Very probably, maybe he went to an unskilled healthcare worker that gave the injection. So, all this relates to the risk that can be from unsafe injection. So now this picture is showing us this pictorial. The use of syringes can transmit infectious diseases, like we said, but does not have to be used in multiple patients for this to occur. The first picture shows new vial, new needle, new syringe. That is the ideal. But then if you take that new syringe and you take it that ample and you give somebody that is hepatitis B infected patient an injection, and you use that same syringe that now has hepatitis B, C, and that same syringe that is taking us to number 3, to that dirty needle, and you are using it for another patient, you are already contaminating that ample because you are using that syringe and needle. So the idea is to make sure that in whatever circumstances, we should not use the same syringe. If you use that same syringe, even if you change the needle, the syringe will still transmit the blood, and that will save to unsafe injection. That's copied. That's just showing us the pictures. Now, what are the types of injection devices that can be used for best practices? Of course, our needles are syringes, blood collection devices for phlebotomy, blood taking, butterfly needles, especially in the pediatric wards, lancets that we use for HIV screening, IV and blood giving sets, and cannula that we use for blood taking. So what are the best practices in injection safety or safe injection? These are very important for patient safety. Our paramount goal should be our patient safety in infection prevention and control. Always administer injection to patients with a new syringe and needle. Do not enter a medication bag or IV bag or bottle with a loose syringe or needle, from what you see in that picture. Do not use medication package as single dose for more than one patient. Ampoules, bags, bottles, or IV solutions. Always use a septic technique when preparing and administering injections. Follow the recommendation of the manufacturers. Remember, hepatitis B, C, HIV transmission in healthcare setting could be from patient to patient because of what we have outlined. It could be from a patient that is passing to another patient. I use it on one patient and I use it on another patient. It could go from patient to patient. It could be from healthcare worker to a patient, but the healthcare worker must have gotten it from the patient and then pass it on to another patient. or the patient can pass it on to the healthcare worker. So that is the vicious cycle, and we are trying to break this chain. We want to break that chain of infection. And the only way to break it is to use one single syringe or one single needle for one injection. Now, our healthcare workers are very, very precious, and I'm sure most of us are healthcare workers, but we should look after ourselves. We don't want to have occupational exposures. We don't want to sustain cuts or injuries to interskin. And how do we do that? If you have to recap, don't do two-handed recapping. It should be one way recapping. They said they do it in the laboratories. It should be one way, so the probability of getting needle stick injury is out. We should not bend or break the needles. As a young house officer, I know I did it. I did it then when you're trying to set up a team. You're trying to think how best to get into tiny things, but that is not allowed anymore. Breaking ampoules to withdraw medication. If you break it to withdraw, there are specifications on how to do it. Exposed to sharp, left unprotected by all the. As soon as you give that injection, it should be at arm's length, disposed immediately. Be needle smart is what we say. Sharps are not discarded or disposed improperly after. Don't for any reason walk from one place to another, because somebody might just bump it. Drop it in the appropriate needle safety box that is waterproof, waterproof. Sudden movement of the patient during the injection, especially children, you need to restrain them to make sure they don't get suddenly agitated and get, and then you can get it sticking to it. So healthcare worker safety, we keep bringing that. Healthcare worker safety should be guided, never recap. It's like just one, resheath your lancet. Lancet is what we use, and as soon as we finish, as soon as we just like the syringe that we drop in a puncture waterproof. Ensure the disposal of use sharp in puncture-proof, DP resistant safety boxes. Eliminate unnecessary injection to reduce the use of sharp or generating unnecessary waste. We want to make sure that we reduce it. The modalities of doing that we'll be discussing later on, and I'm sure some of us know. We don't have to buy near to expiring ampoules that will expire, then we'll start looking for out. And then when there are alternatives, we don't use injection. Always use the sterile disposable needles and syringe. Dispose both needles and syringe together. Don't try to separate them. But in the process of separating them, you can get. And then we have post-exposure prophylaxis. All health facilities should have a place, a sharp injury reporting system, a post-exposure system with clear direction of what to do when there are such incidents. Because it can still happen. We've had incidents and some hospital power suddenly goes out and you just give an HIV injection, and then they trying to move to one place to another, you can get a little sticky. There should be a system in every facility to ensure that that is taken care of. Now, this is just showing us unsafe disposal, and we hope that this is not a familiar sight in some of our facilities, but these are pictures that did not drop from the moon that have just happened. So unsafe injections in the community. Injection can be given in a safe way when the same needle or syringes is used to give the injection. We've said that over and over again. Patients and community can play their part in safe injection by being aware of this. So we need to educate them. We need to let them know that these are not safe, so that they too, it can be like a check and balance, knowing the benefit of taking medicine by mouth when there are alternatives. always asking healthcare workers to consider alternatives, but this is a lot of education. Where they are necessary, ensure that injections are delivered with a syringe and needle opened from new packets. Now, we used to have this in the Making Medical Injection Safer project. We promote oral medication, share the benefits. It's only the healthcare worker who can share that benefit. Don't let us give the injection because of monetary gain. Not because we want to make money from it, we now expose that patient to unnecessary jabs or that baby. Now, I just want to quickly run through the injection safety devices that are available. We have mentioned the reuse prevention. Needles and syringes is designed for single use. There is no way you can reuse it. To prevent reuse, there is safety engineer, and then we have the stick injury prevention that goes into the barrel, or auto-breakable of the syringe when reuse is attempted. This prevents the use of syringes being reused. Remember, we said one syringe, one injection, so that it cannot be picked up and resold by scavengers. Now, this is just showing us, and I'm sure you'll see this on television for the COVID-19 injections. It's called barriers. After you've taken blood, although ideally it should be by containers, there should be something to cover that sharp that can cause stick injury. So these are the best practices that we should have. And the infusion sets, butterfly needles, two should have sheaths to cover them. These are the best practices. The first one is butterfly needle sheath. It can be shielded, or it can auto retract back into the barrel. So that shaft does not expose either the healthcare worker or the community or our cleaners as they pick it up. So we have that even with butterfly needles. Infusion sets, like I said before, cannula is introduced in the metal shaft, then shaft retracts. Models are with or without port. So we have the infusion set after we give the infusion. When we bring it out, it's either it will retract or we cover it on to the port. So that goes for infusion set. These are the best practices, and this should be our goal. A journey of 1,000 steps starts with the steps. But wherever we are, we hope we eventually get there. Now, WHO injection safety program, in those days, look at three major headings. From the picture I've shown earlier on, I've spoken about patient safety. We want to reduce unnecessary injection. And how do we do that? Advocacy, information, education, communication materials, revision of the essential medicine list, making sure we have the best practices, no matter how small. I'm sure some private hospitals have them. And then, of course, the prevention of the use of injection equipment, like the AD auto-disabled syringes or the use prevention syringes. Two, the health worker safety. Needle stick prevention, how do we do that? Training, single stick injury prevention, and sharp boxes has to be provided. Hepatitis B vaccination I've mentioned, that's the only one that can be prevented. And of course, provision of post-exposure prophylaxis in case of accidents. Safety to the community, safe waste management. That's another big topic. We should not move our hospital waste from the hospital and expose our communities to unnecessary risk. Now, reuse prevention plus needle stick injury prevention features are on the top left. Is a barrier that I've discussed before. We have the needle sheath that after giving it, we activate it to cover it. Those are at the top. And then automatically retracting needles after the injection is given, you push it right to the end, you get a clip, and the needle retracts back into the barrel. Those are automatic, they are safety engineered, that's what the WHO is recommending. That's automatic, or you can have a manually retracting needle that you pull back. But remember, this depends on the healthcare worker. He has to be mindful that I need to pull it back, or don't pull it back, to pull back. It's cheaper, but that's what is recommended. So in conclusion then, WHO has developed policies for the protection of the patient, healthcare worker, and the community. WHO guideline for the use of safety engineered syringes for intramuscular, intradermal, subcutaneous in healthcare settings. And this includes our IV line that I just showed, our Lancets, the first evidence-based policy document that addresses the use of safety engineered injection devices for therapeutic injections. It is expected that the evidence-based policy guideline will additionally contribute to prevention of the use of syringe on patients and decrease the rate of needle stick injury in healthcare workers related to injection procedures. Injection, phlebotomy, Lancet procedure, all inclusive, thereby causing a major reduction of these infections that are transmitted due to safe injection in our healthcare setting. Now remember, what is our goal? And that is what I want to leave with you. One needle, one syringe, one time is equal to 0 infection. I wish you well. Have a very good afternoon. Thank you very much for your attention. Well, I did that on behalf of Mrs. Obishori. And I think that is the first one. Just note your questions and reactions. We'll have time to discuss data at the end of the second presentation. And I think if Dr. Omuka is ready, I will do a brief introduction. Dr. Omuka, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, but can you hear me?
Very good, very good. I will just introduce our second speaker, Dr. Eugene Chibueze Oguchukwu Omuka, who is a public health physician of almost 20 years, project coordinator, Damaris Care Network, which is an NGO that works in the rural area to care for less privileged people. He's worked on so many US government projects as a very senior position. Where we've been together on this journey on injection safety. He's worked with immunization, both at the national level with government and at his desk. He's retired but not tired. He's worked at the primary health care with MPACDA. He's worked on HIV/AIDS prevention, infection prevention and control, healthcare waste management, Result to Save Life and ICAM project on the COVID response, preventing infection at the lowest level of our healthcare provision. Is a very, very strong infection prevention enthusiast. Is a member of Nigerian Medical Association and a member of Nigerian Society for Infection Control. I give to you, Dr. Eugene Omuka, to take the next presentation.
Thank you so much, Ma.
Yeah.
And thank you, everyone. Can I share my screen then?
Should we share for you or we share your screen? We can share from here, but if you want to share it.
Yes, yes, I can share my screen.
Okay, share your screen. Dr. Omuka, yes, please go on to share your screen now.
Yes, okay. All right. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can see it now.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can
Okay.
see it. Yes, go ahead.
I'll be speaking on injection safety, progress and pitfalls. We did a review of the literature, and I would like you to follow the trend as I go along. My outline will be an introduction, definition of the term injection safety by WHO, the importance of injection safety. We'll look at the trend in safe injections. That's the main, the main thing of the presentation. While we're going to do a literature review, and then we'll identify injections practices that harm, outline practices that promote safe injections, run through the right ways of giving a safe injection, and then I'll do my recommendations and conclusion. As an introduction, it's estimated that 40% of 16 billion injections given with reused injection equipment lead to 21 million new hepatitis B cases, which is about 32% of all new cases. And then also 2 million new hepatitis C cases, which is about 40% of all new cases. And around 260,000 HIV cases, which is about 5% of all new HIV cases. And also, WHO estimates that 33,800 people get infected with HIV, 1.7 million people get infected with the hepatitis B virus, and about 315,000 people get infected with hepatitis C virus, all through unsafe injections. These estimates are because of unsafe injections. And then introduction continued. In 2003, WHO published the burden of diseases from needle stick injuries in healthcare workers, which showed that about 3 million accidental needle stick injuries lead to 37% of all new hepatitis B virus cases in health workers, and 39% of new hepatitis C cases also in health workers, and approximately 5.5% of new HIV cases in health workers. In 2004, the Federal Ministry of Health, making medical injections safer, which was a USAID intervention project, did a baseline study on injection safety and healthcare waste management assessment. It was found that in this country, Nigeria, that we have a high burden of injections. That is, they found that 4.9 injections were given per patient per year, whereas the WHO expects us to have less than 1%. That is either 0 or less than 1 injections per patient per year. That meant that there was a high demand for injections by residents. And it was noted that stockouts were common, that 25% of patients used to buy their own syringes. And then people practiced the risky two-handed recapping among healthcare workers. As well as that, almost half of healthcare workers interviewed in that project experienced needle stick injuries in the previous 6 months. There was, of course, lack of facilities for safe disposal of healthcare waste. So what do we mean by the safe injection? A safe injection, which includes phlebotomy, that is drawing blood, lancet procedure, or intravenous device insertion, is one that does not harm the recipient. It doesn't expose the provider to any avoidable risk and does not result in any waste that is dangerous for other people or members of the community. It's only given when there's no suitable alternative, and is assured that the right drug is given to the right patient in the right dose, using the right injection equipment at the right site and through the right route. And is also assured when it is given by a skilled health worker. Like was mentioned in the previous presentation, about 16.3 billion injections are given every year in developing countries. And of these, 5 to 10% are from immunizations, including that of COVID, as well as other injections. But for therapeutic injections, of these 16.3, 90 to 95% are for therapeutic reasons. And most medicines used in the primary healthcare can be administered orally. That is what was found out and what we know. From a technical approach, injection safety is supported by 4 main pillars and under one policy. What do I mean? That for you to have a safe injection in any, either nationally or in any institution, whether it's tertiary, secondary, or primary, there must be training and capacity building of health workers. The health workers need to know, like we were shown in the last presentation, different types of devices and how to use them. There was this history of where even senior medical officers and senior nursing staff used to use the reused syringes and declared that they were not good. This was simply because they didn't know how to use them. So training and capacity building is very important for these devices. And secondly, you must have these devices available. The commodities must be available. That is, procurement has to be in place and logistics for safe injection to take place. And then definitely, there has to be a behavior change. Our health workers, members of the community, everyone has to change behavior because one, people are demanding injections when they can take oral medication. And then secondly, people need to know how to use these injections and need to use them properly, as well as dispose their healthcare waste properly. And the fourth pillar is proper healthcare waste management. That is, when these devices are used, they must be managed properly and put away safely in such a way that they will not cause any harm to anyone, either the worker, the patient, or the recipient, and members of the community. And either institution or government has to put, or the hospitals have to put policies in place to ensure that injections are safely given. That is why we have this policy, these pillars and the policy to support safe injection. Looking at some global injection parameters, it was noticed that between 2000 and 2010, when the injection safety had been introduced into the country, there was a reduction in the use of injection equipment from about 39.6% to 5.5%. That is, people were no longer using, at least there was an improvement in the use of the reuse prevention equipment. Then HIV cases dropped from 280,000 to about 33,900. That's about 87% reduction. And hepatitis C infection dropped from about 2 million to 315,000, 91% reduction. And hepatitis B infection dropped from about 21 million to 1.7 million, which was about 83%. Average number of injections given per person in the developing country dropped from 3.4 to 2.9, still to reach the required WHO standard. In Nigeria, in our country, the improvement we found was that several local Nigerian manufacturers were identified that produced personal protective equipment and healthcare waste management commodities. One of them was in Calabar, the other one was in Port Harcourt. And then 2 factories commenced production of reuse prevention syringes. One also produced safety boxes. The one in Calabar produced safety boxes and the reuse prevention syringes, while the Port Harcourt factory produced reuse prevention syringes. In addition, communities in an intervention state of this project were sensitized on injection safety messages, that is, promoting oral medication, safety of necessary injections, and healthcare waste management in the community. Looking outside this country, we just took a brief on the burden of safe injections in Egypt and India. It was found that there was a very high prevalence of viral hepatitis in Egypt, over 150,000 cases of hepatitis each year, and about 281 million injections were given per year, and 6.8 estimated injections per person per year, which was very high. And 8% of injections were definitely unsafe. In India, 0.8 billion injections were given per year, 2.9 injections per person per year was found, and 82.5 of them were for curative purposes, while 62.9% were considered very unsafe. That's about 1.9 billion injections. Furthermore, in Egypt, it was found that in a cost-effectiveness study in injection safety and reuse prevention syringes were completed. It was also found by the WHO that the patient safety curriculum course was introduced or initiated, and Egypt in itself had a manufacturing industry to produce WHO pre-qualification 3 mil, 5 mil, and 10 mils injections, syringes locally. And a campaign was introduced to educate the population in injection safety in Arabic, and then continuing medical education of all medical and paramedical students were put in place. In India, the procurement of reuse prevention syringes for region of Punjab that had a half a million population was put in place, and the community-based knowledge, attitude, and practice study was completed to be used for messages for intervention. Again, investment in injection safety and reuse prevention study was done in Punjab, and possible advocacy for the whole of the country. Then injection safety training materials for healthcare workers, and in particular nurses and other paramedical staff, were developed and translated into local languages. At this point, I'd like to take us through what has happened in Nigeria over about 15-year period. We'll just pick quite a number, and I hope you'll be able to be patient with me to go through most of them so that we can see the progress and the pitfalls of how we've had injection safety history in our country. In 2005, Musa did a study published in the Nigerian Post-Medical Journal in September 2005, and reported an injection safety practice among healthcare workers in immunization centers in urban settings of Nigeria. The results show that 80.4% of the respondents had poor knowledge of safe immunization injection, and about the same number were not aware of any policy on injection safety. It was also noted that injection abscesses was the main health hazard reported by 69% of the subjects, while 9.8% mentioned that needle stick injury was also a health hazard. Reuse of syringes for vaccine withdrawal and recapping of used needles were common practices that were noted, while accidental needle stick injury was reported by 49% of the subjects. The group under Musa recommended that there should be retraining of staff, there should be adequate supplies of injection equipment, and there should be provision of appropriate facilities for disposal of injection waste. The 8-Star-1 project, USID project, did a study in 2009 and a follow-up in 2012. Some indicators were taken, and these are: 1, key reference documents. That is where you have injection policy and guidelines available. At baseline, it was only 5% that were available of these documents, but by follow-up in 2012, there was an increase to 57%. No stock out of safety boxes in 6 months prior to the study. At baseline was 5%, and at follow-up it was 85%. That means we had less stock out of safety box. Then availability of puncture and leak-proof sharps containers in each injection area. At baseline was 27%, and at follow-up it was 98%. Quite a significant improvement. And the use of safety boxes as only containers for sharp waste disposal was 14% at baseline and 98% at follow-up. And then the satisfactory disposal of used injection equipment was 15% at baseline, 63% at follow-up. And hand washing with soap and running water or alcohol-based hand sanitizer was 12% at baseline and 23% at follow-up. Availability of BCC materials, that's behavior change communication materials, was 11% at baseline and is 86% at follow-up. I'll go through further studies. In 2008, Odayemi and others in the Lagos University Teaching Hospital reported in the Nigerian Quarterly Journal of Hospital Medicine that prevalence of needle stick injuries was high, 72.9%, and that most injuries were from giving injections, drawing blood, and during vein cannulation. They concluded that the SHARPS policy was needed in LUTH to reduce the high prevalence of needle stick injuries, and specific guidelines followed to protect the injured workers. Etifit and Ojong did a study to determine the knowledge and practice of safe injection among nurses in University of Calabar Teaching Hospital in 2010. The result they had showed that 8% of the nurses had poor knowledge of injection safety, and 40.3% of nurses did not practice safe injection. This group concluded that though majority of the nurses were knowledgeable and practiced safe injection, some were not knowledgeable and had not practiced safe injection, thus making continuous education, training, and supervision of nurses in relation to injection safety knowledge and practice very necessary. Akonde and others in 2011 studied knowledge and attitude of nurses in PhDs in Ilorin, Kwara State on injection practice, safety practices, and came to the conclusion that there was poor in-depth knowledge of safe injections among primary health care workers, and that retraining was required. B.O. Akim and A. Abimbola studied patterns of needle stick injuries in PhDs in Ilorin and published their work in 2011. And they observed that, that 78% of PhD workers claimed they recapped needle, while recapping the needle was observed in 85% of the facilities, and that 31% of the health workers had needle stick injuries, and only 19.5% of them reported the injury to the health authority. Furthermore, with Omorebe and others who studied injection practices in a mission hospitals in Benin and published in the Annals of African Medicine in 2012, reported that the knowledge of injection safety among respondents was poor. That was 55.7%, while the practice of it was found to be good in 48.4% and excellent in 47.5%. We still see that the percentages were still very low, well under 50%. Then they noted that 23% and 32.8% respondents recap use needles regularly and sometimes regularly. That is, that 23% recapped use needles regularly, while 32.8% recapped sometimes. Majority of them, respondents, had sustained needle stick injuries. They concluded that the knowledge of injection safety was poor among the nurses in the mission hospitals in Benin, but that their practice of injection safety was encouraging, and there was need for regular training on injection safety to improve their knowledge and practice. O.A. Bolaniwan and others in Health Science Journal published in 2012 noted in the assessment of injection safety practices among primary health care workers in Ilorin, Nigeria, that there was recapping of needles in 26% of the facilities. That was 86.7%. And the used needles were observed outside the safety box. That is immediate vicinity of the safety box in 80% of the facilities, and around the premises of the facilities in about 33% of the facilities that were visited. They concluded that there was high unsafe injection practices among primary healthcare workers in Ilorin and recommended training and supportive supervision for primary healthcare workers. Adejumo and Dada, in their study of 2 hospitals in Ibadan, of the knowledge, attitude, and practice in injection safety, that was published in the International Journal of Infection Control in 2013, noted that the high knowledge of injection safety was not translated to practice. That about 50.4%, that's about half of the participants, sustained sharp injury, while 15.6% of them reported the injuries to their institution. Furthermore, Onyomocho and others in 2013 studied knowledge of injection safety among healthcare workers in prison health facilities in Kaduna, and noted that 54.3% of the health workers had good knowledge. The rest had poor knowledge, and only 50% had fair knowledge of the practice of safe injections. They recommended training for prison health staff. As I go on, let us know that O.O.M.R.A. and KDW in their assessment of injection safety practices in an Eastern Nigeria teaching hospital published in 2014 in the Pan-African Medical Journal, that despite most workers having heard about injection safety, 45% of the workers recapped needles after use, and about something had needle stick injuries. They recommended regular updates for health workers on injection safety. Gazama and Bauer and others in their study in a Northeast Zone Teaching Hospital published in the Nigerian Journal of Clinical Practice in 2014 reported that their study depicted poor knowledge and the practice of injection safety inadequate injection safety supplies, and non-compliance to the injection safety policy and guidelines. Wokoro and others in Research Journal of Health Sciences in 2014 reported the prevalence, causes, and prevention of needle stick injury among health workers at the Federal Medical Center Owerri to be during injection procedure. That means that the needle stick injuries they had was during injection procedure, and that was in about 34% of them, and the recapping was in about 14%. They advocated that standard and understandable programs to avoid needle stick injury should be encouraged, namely avoidance of recapping and use of disposal containers to discard waste. Amira and Awobushi, in a publication in the International Journal of Occupational and Environmental Medicine in 2014, reported on needle stick injuries among healthcare workers in hemodialysis units in Lagos, Nigeria. They found out that 24.5% of the staff had suffered needle stick injuries in the last previous 12 months, with most of them having the common activity leading to needle stick injuries being recapping of needles in about 45%, and improper disposal of needles in about 30%, and venous cannulation and setting of drips in about 27.5%. For them, prevention was by education of staff and adherence to universal standard precaution. Then in Benin, in Benue State University Teaching Hospital, Makurdi, Eguda and Ibudu, in a study published in 2015, reported on prevalence of needle stick and sharp injury among healthcare workers. Their findings were that 9.8% had needle stick and sharp injuries in the preceding 12 months, and 46% had it in their career. Those injuries, that is about 16.7%, occurred during injection procedures, with less than a third of the healthcare workers not seeking medical treatment or post-exposure prophylaxis. The health institution managers, they said, should include prevention, reporting, and treatment of needle stick and sharp injuries as part of the training for their employees. Ishara and others in their study of the prevalence of needle stick injury in UBTH, Benin City, published in the Annals of Medical and Health Sciences Research in 2015, reported a prevalence of needle stick injuries among health workers in the preceding 12 months to be 51%. And that doctors, medical doctors, carried the load, as well as nurses. They carried the highest occurrence. Medical doctors were 80% involved in needle stick injuries, and nurses were 70% involved, and they had the highest occurrence. And the recapping of needles, 13%, and patient aggression, that is either patient shifting or moving or reacting, caused needle stick injuries in about 26% of the cases. And that the majority, 62% of the injuries, were not reported. Furthermore, Ijachi, Audi, and Araoye, in their study in the knowledge and practice of healthcare workers on injection safety in Benue State University, Makurdi, in 2016, reported in the Journal of Community Medicine and Primary Healthcare Practice that the respondents had good knowledge, that is 70.2% of them, positive attitude in 87.2% of them, and their appropriate practice was 79.8%. These scores, they felt were relatively good, but there were some misconceptions about the diseases transmitted by unsafe injection. These people had the knowledge, had the practice, had the good attitude, but they didn't have a good knowledge of the diseases that were transmissible as safe injection, some of which were mentioned in the last presentation. And for them, the commonest unsafe injection practice among the respondents was recap of needles in 19.1%. They concluded that there is disproportionate gap between the level of knowledge and the practice of injection safety, and recommended continuing medical education among health professionals to reduce the rate of needle stick injuries. Stella E. Kanu and others reporting on knowledge and practice of injection safety among nurses in University of Calabar Teaching Hospital in 2016 in the Global Journal of Pure and Applied Sciences revealed the results that showed 59.7% of the respondents had good knowledge of injection safety, and 66% had good practice of injection safety, while 6.8% had poor practice. They said that the barriers to injection safety practices included inadequate supply of injection safety material, non-display of injection safety guidelines, and the suggested provision of injection safety commodities for good practice. I think we're coming to the end. Michael Asuzu and others published a study on needle stick injuries among healthcare workers in Ondo, Nigeria in 2016 in the International Journal of Medicine and Public Health. Needle stick injuries were reported by 55.8% of the healthcare workers, and syringe needles were responsible for 68.5% of all injuries. About half, 51.4% of injuries occurred during use, while 23.4% of injuries were disposal related. And according to them, only 25% reported injuries. These findings, they said, implicate the need for a multi-focus intervention to disabuse reuse of devices and encourage reporting of injuries. Danong Monde Langche, in a report published in the Texila International Journal of Public Health in December 2016, on the knowledge on injection safety and biological waste handling among auxiliary healthcare workers, showed that there was a low level of knowledge on needle stick injury. Let us take note that auxiliary healthcare workers are just people that were trained locally by either the head of the institutions or went through some informal but training to just get them to support qualified nurses in their practice. And these people didn't have, of course, any professional backing as such. However, they're involved in large practice with injections in the country. And Danong reported that they had a poor attitude towards PEP among these workers in both Wukari and Zinc General Hospitals in Taraba State, Nigeria. Let me just further say that COs and others investigated on the perception of injection safety measures among training nurses in selected facilities in Owerri Senatorial Zone, Imo State, Nigeria, published in 2019. Their findings indicated moderate level of perception of injection safety measures among student nurses in the zone, which increased with age and years of practice. That is, the older and the more practice they had, a little bit better. It was recommended that advancement of surveillance on educative programs on knowledge and practice of injection safety measures should be carried out for both students and registered nurses in the Owerri zone. C. Mba, S. Abubakar, and others did a study of knowledge and practice of injection safety among healthcare workers in the Nigerian secondary health facilities in Kano, Nigeria, published in the International Journal of Infection Control in January 2019. The results showed that 88.7% of the healthcare workers correctly described injection safety as defined by WHO. However, only 18.75% and 40.0% had good knowledge of risk associated with and diseases that can be transmitted through unsafe injection, respectively. That is, 18% had good knowledge of the risk associated with unsafe injections, and 40% just had knowledge of diseases transmitted by unsafe injections. In addition, 25% of them reported safe injection practices. The reuse of syringe was reported by 37% of the respondents, and over 88% recap use needles. Majority of the healthcare workers reported a previous history of needle stick injury. You can see the progress and the ups and downs in this the practice here. This group advocated for adequate and safe injection commodities in all facilities or in all levels of facilities of the healthcare delivery. So, what is an unsafe injection? An unsafe injection, therefore, which includes phlebotomy, drawing blood, lancet procedure, intravenous device insertion, is one that causes harm to the patient, the provider, or results in waste that is harmful to other members of the community. And this is what we've been saying we should be aware of. And then it is important to note again that the safe injection, phlebotomy, lancet procedure, intravenous device insertion is one that does not harm the recipient, does not expose the healthcare worker to any avoidable risk, and does not result in waste that is dangerous to the community. So, what are the practices that can harm the client? Like they mentioned before, contaminated drugs, when they're administered, can harm the patient. Expired drugs can harm the patient. Syringes that are loaded with different medications can also harm the patient. There are some drugs you can mix, and by the time you leave them to settle down, you see they change color, they change texture, and that could be very harmful product. Drugs and vaccines should not be stored in the same refrigerator. Once you store drugs and vaccines, supposed to be kept in proper cold chain facility, while drugs can be maintained also either on the shelves or in the refrigerator, depending on what drugs they are. But we should make sure that vaccines are properly stored, ensuring sound cold chain facilities. Then applying pressure to bleeding site with dirty material on finger can be a cause of harm to the patient. Drugs that are administered at incorrect anatomical sites can also harm the patient. Sometimes people put needles almost at the sciatic nerve, and that is very wrong. Then unsterile needles and syringes that are used can, of course, lead to infections. Loading syringes with multiple doses can also harm the patient. And health workers not observing aseptic technique can be also dangerous to the patient. Storing used multiple dose vials beyond recommended period can also be harmful to the patient. So unsafe injection practice that can harm the worker includes carrying used needles and syringes around before disposal. It's like carrying a weapon of mass destruction. It can be very, very terrible, and needle stick injury can occur. Placing used needles and syringes on a surface before disposal can also be harmful to the worker. You can easily knock your finger or any part of the body against the exposed needle. The two-handed recapping is also harmful and can easily cause needle stick injuries. Reaching into a container of used needles and syringes, which is almost a common practice. Sometimes people bend over and something of importance could fall into the container containing the needle stick injury, the needles and syringes. And most workers will want to use their hands to pick up such materials. No, you should either use tongs or use an instrument to pick up that material if it has to be picked up. Manipulating used shafts, manually detaching them from needles, detaching the needle from the syringe, like many young medical officers do. Cleaning, bending, breaking. Sometimes they bend the tip of the needle so as to use it to extract foreign bodies from ears and nose. That is also wrong. That's not the right instrument to use. And sometimes breaking off the head of the needle to do a lumbar puncture for children is also wrong. It's a wrong practice. And this should not be practiced. You can easily harm yourself. Passing used shots from one person to another is also a practice that can harm the worker. The ideal thing is to deliver the injection and place the used needle or syringe in a sharp container, which should be at arm's length and eye level to the health worker. Overfilling of safety boxes, of course, that is very harmful because the exposed needles and syringes can cause needle stick injury. Using syringe and needle on an agitated patient, like was reported in Benin, can also be harmful, especially children, when you are giving them injections without assistance. Then to the community, leaving used needles and syringes in areas accessible to the public can be very harmful. Children go play about with these things. Some people go pick up some materials to use for their hair and some other things like that. That could be very harmful. Sharing needles and syringes like in drug users is also harmful. Reusing needles and syringes, of course, is very harmful to members of the community. And receiving injection from the informal sector is very, very harmful because you are supposed to get an injection from a qualified, experienced provider. So quickly, key steps to ensure a safe injection. Always use a needle and syringe from a new sealed undamaged packet for every injection. Do not recap. Place needles and syringes in a safety box immediately after use and manage injection waste safely and appropriately. Quickly also, let's go through the 11 rights ways to give an injection. It has to be the right patient. The prescription you are holding must carry the name of the patient you are going to give the injection. And you must call out the name so that the person knows it's for him or for her. It has to be the right drug. You have to look at the prescription and ensure that it's the right prescription, the right drug you are giving to the patient. It has to be in the right formulation, whether it is in a mix, in an aqueous solution or an oily solution. You must know which formulation it is. It has to be the right injection equipment. Is it a syringe or a needle, or is it a butterfly needle? It has to be in the right dose. That has to be ascertained from the prescription sheet, and has to be the right time. Some drugs are given twice daily, some are given 3 times, some are given 8 hourly. It's different from 3 times a day. It has to be the right route, whether it's intramuscular, intravenous, or any other route that is specified in the prescription sheet. And the drug has to be through the right storage to make sure that if it's a vaccine, it has not violated the VVM rules. It has to be the right method of disposal. Syringes and needles must be discarded in safety boxes, which are puncture-proof and leak-proof materials. Then it has to be the right anatomical site, whether it's in the deltoid region of the shoulder, or it has to be intramuscular, in the gluteal region. And then it has to be the right trained personnel, that is a trained worker. In summary, we've gone through the burden of unsafe injections. We've also defined a safe injection and unsafe injection. We've looked at the literature review in Nigerian institutions and states and seen our progress and our pitfalls and the reasons for them. We've identified unsafe practices that cause harm to the recipient, the provider, and the community. We've looked at key steps in ensuring a safe injection. We also looked at the 11 rights ways of giving injection. And we'll just look at our conclusion and recommendation. First, we know now that injection safety knowledge among health workers is fair across the country, but not good enough. This knowledge is at variance with practice. Hence, there's a continued high prevalence of needle stick injuries. Intervention with safe injection practice and proper healthcare waste management supplies must make the difference in a lot of the studies we looked at. And we now advocate that intensive intervention across the country is recommended with a focus on continuous and updated education of all cadres of healthcare workers in the country. By so doing, I believe that we'll be able to reach our goal of ensuring that injection practices are safe for the patient or recipient, for the health worker, as well as members of the community. I want to thank you for listening. And looking at the picture on the right side of this page, it says, this child's life and the mother's trust are in our hands. We need to do what is needful and safe for them. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Okuka. That was a brilliant one. And now we are discussing, we've had the 2 presentations. We want your comments put up, either you write in the chat box or you put up your hand to react. We've had so much. We had the overview, and then we have the progress and the pitfall. Of course, Nigeria started from 2004. We have seen that healthcare worker safety is paramount. Needle stick injury is still happening despite all. Why is that happening? 200 recapping is still happening both at the primary, secondary, and tertiary levels. And then, of course, the community is still not very safe because it's not all our facilities that have the best healthcare waste management. Work is ongoing, but there's still more work to be done. And I'm happy that some of our lecturers are here. We need your comments, your reactions, all the recommendations from all the studies. Are we really putting it into use? Is anybody looking into this? We are talking about the best commodities. Could that help us? So I'm asking you to please put up your hand. and let's discuss. And as we do that, please, the feedback for this session is in the chat box. Can we please click on it and give us feedback on how to make our sessions better? So now over to you. We want people to react. Put up your hand. We want to have your feedback. Questions, clarification, comments. Thank you very much, Dr. Umuka.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. So please, reactions, comments. Somebody said thank you for attending today's session. Please, that we should share the presentations, but we'll discuss that. We are recording it, we are going to share it, because we want to spread this message. Right? I wonder if any of the findings were shared with those facilities. Well, we may not be, this is a literature review. Where we want to, I'm sure, because we have studies from Calabar from the north, from the west, from the east, from the south, when we do studies, do we just publish it? Maybe you can talk, put up your hand and talk. After we do the studies, do we give feedback to the facilities? Or do we just publish for the sake of publishing? But that's another thing. Because we should be getting better. We shouldn't just do our studies, publish, and then we rest on our laurels. I want reactions from the floor, especially from those of us that are residents, that are in teaching hospitals, that work with government, what happens? Please, somebody should talk. Clementina, do you want to say something? Clementina. Hello, you can unmute and talk, please. Because we need to discuss, we need to see where a lot of work has been done, a lot of research, but we need to see how can we make things better. How do we just do the study and then that is it? Because the study, now putting it all together, they're all very similar. Needle-stick injuries is still going on. What do we think should be done? What should be the way forward? You are the change agents. You are the tomorrows of this country. What should we do? At least I need one or two comments. One or two comments, hands up. Hands up, nobody wants to talk. Or are we overwhelmed? Hello? Am I talking to myself?
We can hear you, ma.
Yes, can you say something? I'm so glad to have you.
Okay, thank you so much, ma.
Introduce yourself and say something. Thank you.
Okay, ma. My name is Olumuyiwa Ario. I'm an infectious disease resident. I also serve as an IPC focal person in my state. I just want to, this is a very important topic. And I noticed that a few weeks ago, I still have a colleague who had a needle stick injury. And unfortunately, the patient was reactive to surface antigen, and the individual was not adequately immunized, and the person have to take HBV immunoglobulin of over 300,000 naira, just a single shot. So this is just to emphasize that what we are actually discussing here is very, very important. I know the last presenter talked about the fact that healthcare workers at the primary facility do not have adequate knowledge as regard this injection safety information. I just want to say it's not even just at that level alone. And another thing is the fact that even at secondary facility or tertiary facility, people that even have the knowledge, we notice that the knowledge does not even translate to practice. And that is a big challenge. Another instance of another colleague some years ago was an house officer that had a needle stick injury, also from a patient that was officer. And one thing I noticed was responsible for that is the fact that the sharp bus was far away. While the person was trying to go and locate the sharp bus, he actually inoculate the person on the way. So one challenge I've noticed about injection safety practice is the fact that, yes, we know that some don't have the knowledge, but people that even still have the knowledge, the practice also is not adequate. And I believe a lot need to be done in this area. And thanks to Dr. Showandi, Professor Ogushola, the way they've been mentoring us, letting people understand the fact that some of these things look very simple, but we discover that as simple as they are causing so much damages. And I believe a lot still need to be done as regard training, advocacy to ensure that at all levels, good practices to ensure injection safety are put into place and to reduce associated morbidity. Thank you, man. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so very much. I'm so glad to have you on, Dr. Alia. And
thank you,
we should all go back, skip over it, and see that we reduce this infection. Lassa fever is endemic in Nigeria, and we just got 2 gynecologists in Nasarawa State. Very sad. But those are hospital acquired. And I really do not know whether it's due to acoustic injury, but it could be part of it. So we should all just do something. What can I do to make a difference? That would be my message. One more topic? Anybody wants to say something else again? Mrs. Ayorinde, please. Mrs. Margaret Ayorinde, nice to have you. Your hand is up.
Yes, ma. Good afternoon, ma. Well done, ma, for this germane topic that we have talked about, injection safety. In fact, many things were just running through my mind, right from keeping leftover drugs on the ward. When we want to draw, we use the same needle. We use it to draw. We kept it. We used to keep it on the bottle. At times, someone will be cock it back, saying the person is coming back the next 2 hours to take the next dose. And also the area of sharp boxes. In fact, we just pray that should be a change, and transforming knowledge base to practice is very, very important. Thank you, ma.
Thank you. Because having the knowledge does not translate to practice, and that is where we need to have a continuous supervision and job reminders, so that it doesn't cost us our life. I hope we really had I know we're very few. I know that most of us have started traveling for Christmas. I want to thank those of us that made it to this session. It really made my day, because we were getting a bit discouraged this morning because so many things happened. But thank God that we were able to go through this together. And I'm sure together, and with God, and with the government on our side, we're able to move this country forward. We're able to enjoy the fruits of our labor when we finally retire. Our clinical medicine will not be, we don't want to come to work and then go back and have liver cirrhosis and stuff like that. But we just want to skip over this. We are recording the session. We're going to share it. We want to even share it further. Please give us your feedback. Give us your feedback so that we can continue to improve. We wanted to have the antimicrobial stewardship second. We had the first session in, I think, September. Then we had healthcare waste management in October. Professor Aboderi is ready. Unfortunately, got back late. So we are hoping to have him on if he's ready in January. We will have that will be antimicrobial stewardship, and the health facility level, which is another part, a very, very important part of infection prevention and control. So we are hoping to have that. Our scheduled logistics can either move to February if we can combine both in January. Let's hope that we have antimicrobial stewardship in January by the grace of God. And we hope to make it better, and then with the suggestions and stuff will help us make it better. For those of you that do research, please, when you do the research, please share the result with the management of the facility, not just the management, people with government, but they need to know. It's not just us getting it for our promotion. We want to be prof, we want to be all that, but then we need to share it. And we need to change behavior, including those of us that are here and those that work under us, all with us. We need to change behavior. We cannot continue to be doing the same thing here in. And those of us that teach student nurses or medical students, pharmacists, we should please pass on the best practices to the new generation that are coming after us. I want to say thank you very much. Wish you all Merry Christmas and a prosperous 2022. We'll get over this COVID-19, Omicron or no Omicron. And as for me, I've gotten my booster dose. I want to advise all of us to go and make sure that we get our booster dose. Thank you all very much. Have a lovely afternoon. Thank you and God bless you. Merry Christmas.